On August 7th, 2025, that's exactly what happened in the farmlands of Zaporizhia. A peaceful dawn exploded into chaos as Russian forces rolled in with a war machine the size of a small city, 50 main battle tanks, 70 armored vehicles, and over 600 troops, all loaded with weapons and fuel. Their mission? Reinforce a captured base and use it as a launchpad for a crushing assault deep into Ukraine. What they didn't know was that Ukraine had prepared something extraordinary, a counterstrike so fast, so precise, that it would leave military analysts stunned. Stick around, because what happens next will change the way you think about modern warfare. And if you love real battlefield stories told with all the grit and detail, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The Kremlin was confident this would be an unstoppable advance, a steamroller no one could slow down. But they were driving straight into a trap. Within moments, Ukraine unleashed an attack unlike anything the battlefield had seen before. The sky filled with the low, menacing hum of drones. From the flanks came the roar of motorcycles, cutting arcs through the fields like predators closing in on their prey. These weren't just everyday bikes, they were ordinary civilian motorcycles, rebuilt into lightning-fast war machines. Across the smoky fields, bursts of gunfire tore through the air. Fuel trucks erupted into towering fireballs, shock waves rumbling through the ground. Medics racing to save the wounded were themselves caught in deadly blasts from aerial mines. In the chaos, a young Russian conscript stumbled out of a wrecked armored carrier, only to vanish in the fireball of a second explosion. The question comes, could Russia get this massive new force to the base before Ukraine stopped them? That base was the key, a stronghold that, if reinforced, could launch devastating strikes deeper into Ukrainian territory. But just hours earlier, the final thread of diplomacy had snapped. Moscow had issued one last demand. Ukraine must pull its forces back 50 kilometers from every Russian-held base. That retreat would leave 1.2 million civilians wide open to artillery fire. President Volodymyr Zelensky's answer was firm and immediate. Not one step back. The Kremlin's response came just as fast, and it was anything but subtle. At exactly 6 a.m., satellites picked up a surge of Russian armor pouring out from the ruins of a captured airfield near Melitopol. Leading the charge were 50 T-90M main battle tanks, each a 48-ton beast armed with a 125mm cannon. Flanking them, 70 BMP-3 armored personnel carriers, hauling over 600 troops and more than 40 tons of ammo. Rifles, anti-tank missiles, mortar shells. The convoy stretched 3.4 kilometers, a steel serpent of more than 120 armored vehicles, fuel trucks, and supply carriers, enough firepower to sustain a 10-day frontline push. Their goal, reach the base in 4 hours, lock it down, and from there, drive as far as Dnipro, just 120 kilometers away. The ground shook under the combined roar of engines, over 65,000 horsepower churning forward. Diesel fumes hung heavy in the air, mixing with the harsh metallic clank of tank treads. To Moscow, this was a blunt message to Kiev: we can crush you at will. But inside Ukraine's command centers, the mood was different. Watching the live satellite feed, commanders saw not just a threat, but an opportunity. If they struck now, they could smash Russia's gamble before the first shot was even fired. A battle plan unlike anything ever attempted was already taking shape. At 6:12 a.m., less than 15 minutes after the convoy began its push from Melitopol, Ukraine's top brass gathered deep inside a fortified underground command center in Dnipro. The intel was crystal clear. If that armored column made it to the captured base, it would turn into a fortress capable of striking 3 Ukrainian regions within hours. General Mikhailo Havlenko, commander of the Southern Defense Sector, studied the satellite feed tight formation, 28 kilometers per hour, over 120 vehicles, 600-plus troops, and trucks loaded with enough ammo for days of heavy combat. Every minute wasted meant they'd be harder to stop. There was no debate. Havlenko gave a single, uncompromising order: we hit them before they dig in. Instantly, the operations floor erupted into controlled chaos. Orders flew across encrypted channels, activating Ukraine's aerial strike network. Phase 1, 20 long-range UAVs with thermal optics and live encrypted feeds lifted off from forward strips. slipping just under radar detection, mapping the precise location of every tank, carrier, and fuel truck. While the recon drones beamed back every detail, Phase 2 was already being armed on the tarmac. In hidden hangars, 80 low-cost, high-lethality suicide drones were readied, each carrying a 12-kilogram shaped charge, powerful enough to pierce tank armor or blow up an ammo truck. Their mission was simple: break the convoy apart, sow panic, and force the Russians into defensive chaos before Ukraine's ground forces even got close. For Ukraine's commanders, this wasn't just a counterattack. It was a high-stakes gamble to wipe out a major Russian assault before it could even take its first breath. And the clock was now ticking toward impact. By 6:28 a.m., the stillness over the wheat fields shattered. The first wave of Ukraine's suicide drones skimmed low across the ground, 80 in total, each about the size of a motorcycle, weighing just over 35 kilos and flying at 140 kilometers per hour, barely 5 meters above the earth, to stay invisible to Russian radar. These weren't NATO's high-priced machines. They were built in secret workshops for under $4,000 apiece. Yet each carried a copper-lined warhead capable of punching through 650 millimeters of armor, enough to rip through the side of a T-90M tank. At 6:32 a.m., Russian gunners finally spotted the incoming swarm. BMP-3 autocannons spat bursts of 30-millimeter fire. PKM machine guns unleashed streams of tracers. But there were too many targets. The first hit flipped an 18-ton BMP-3 onto its side. Moments later, 3 more drones slammed into trucks hauling 5,000 mortar shells, setting off a chain of explosions that ripped through a 200-meter stretch of the column, killing or wounding over 40 troops in seconds. Every time Russian troops destroyed one of these drones, they paid the price in blood. In less than 6 minutes, the once organized convoy dissolved into panic. Vehicles burned, fuel poured into the dirt and ignited, and tank crews bailed out. Convinced artillery was zeroing in on them. From the Ukrainian command center, the thermal feeds told the story in real time. The massive Russian push had ground to a halt. 50 tanks, 70 APCs, hundreds of troops, all frozen in place. The advancing column was gone. In its place, a kill zone littered with wrecks and fire. And while the surviving suicide drones still prowled for new targets, Ukraine was already moving to the next step. Their second strike force was throttling toward the battlefield 200 motorcycles, each carrying armed infantry, ready to carve the convoy apart. By 6:41 a.m., the deep drone of engines was replaced by a sharper, high-pitched roar, the unmistakable scream of dirt bike motors. From behind a low ridge, 200 military-grade motorcycles burst into view, each carrying 2 Ukrainian soldiers, a driver and a gunner. These bikes were light, just 145 kilos, but built for war. Reinforced suspension, acceleration from 0 to 60 kilometers per hour in under 5 seconds. The ability to climb 40-degree slopes and range for 300 kilometers on a single 14-liter tank. The riders split instantly into 3 attack wings. Wing 180 bikes swept down the southern flank under the smoke of burning Russian armor. Wing 260 bikes looped north through tree cover. Wing 3, another 60, accelerated hard to cut off the convoy's retreat. Each gunner carried a deadly mix RPG-26 rockets, wire-guided missiles able to punch through 400 to 460 millimeters of armor, and laser-guided rounds that could slice through 800 millimeters more than enough to kill a T-90M head-on. 6:46 a.m., Wing 1 struck first. An anti-tank missile from just 280 meters smashed into a T-90M's engine block, igniting its fuel cell. The blast hurled the 12-ton turret nearly 9 meters into the air before it slammed back down upside down. Within 4 minutes, 7 armored vehicles were destroyed, including 3 tanks. Wing 2 hit tougher resistance. A BMP-3 autocannon spitting 200 rounds a minute killed 4 Ukrainian riders. But in return, they wiped out 5 APCs in under 3 minutes, one obliterated by an RPG at just 23 meters, close enough for the gunner to feel the heat. The real hammer blow came from Wing 3. By 6:50 a.m., they had completely severed the convoy's rear escape route. 2 fuel trucks, each hauling 18,000 liters of diesel, were struck by tandem anti-tank missiles. The resulting fireball shot 45 meters into the air, engulfing 3 APCs, 2 cargo trucks loaded with 7,000 mortar rounds, and killing at least 28 Russian troops instantly. With the convoy now trapped on 3 sides, the motorcycle squads dismounted. Moving swiftly between burning wrecks, they cleared out survivors using grenades and automatic fire. Above them, Ukrainian recon drones updated each wing leader every 12 seconds, making sure not a single gap opened in the encirclement. In just 14 minutes, Ukraine's 2-wheeled strike force had destroyed or disabled 21 armored vehicles, ignited 4 fuel trucks, killed over 110 Russian troops, and captured dozens more dazed, disarmed, and still clutching empty rifles. By 6:55 a.m., the Russian column was no longer an army on the move. It was a graveyard of twisted steel and black smoke. That's when Ukraine launched the final phase, total encirclement. 6:57 a.m. From the east, 3 mechanized infantry platoons, 120 soldiers, advanced behind the cover of destroyed BMPs, rifles up, every step coordinated. From the north and south, the surviving motorcycle units closed in, shrinking the kill zone from 1.4 kilometers across to less than 500 meters in under 5 minutes. Russian resistance collapsed. Soldiers ditched helmets and body armor just to run faster. Desperate radio calls begged for artillery support, but their own guns were too far away, and reinforcements couldn't get through the chaos. At 7:03 a.m., Ukrainian mortar teams 1.2 kilometers out began pounding the last Russian pocket. Each 82mm shell, guided by live drone feeds, landed within 5 meters of its target. 3 more APCs were obliterated. The final group of Russian soldiers was driven into a shallow depression and straight into the tightening ring of Ukrainian forces. By 7:08 a.m., it was over. Surrounded, cut off, and with their vehicles burning, the survivors surrendered. The aftermath was staggering. In under 40 minutes, Ukraine had destroyed 29 armored vehicles, including 9 main battle tanks. 4 fuel trucks and 7 ammo carriers had been detonated. More than 140 Russian soldiers were dead, and 180 were taken prisoner, among them 2 company commanders. Over 400 rifles, 60 machine guns, 35 RPG launchers, and tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition were seized on the spot. By 7:15 a.m., Ukrainian engineers were already tagging and cataloging the captured weapons to be sent straight back to the front lines. For Russia, it wasn't just a battlefield loss, it was a humiliation. For Ukraine, this battle was proof that speed, precision, and ingenuity could dismantle even the heaviest assault before it had a chance to strike. From the first shot at 5:45 a.m. to the last surrender before 7:20 a.m., a force worth hundreds of millions in hardware had been wiped out not by sheer numbers, but by tactical brilliance and unorthodox mobility. The stats stunned military analysts. 29 armored vehicles destroyed, 11 more disabled, over 140 troops killed, 180 captured, and enough weapons seized to arm an entire brigade. The psychological hit to the Kremlin was just as devastating. What began as a confident push into Zaporizhzhia ended as a burning scrapyard of steel and shattered morale. But the real takeaway went beyond numbers. Ukraine had shown that adaptability could beat raw firepower. Drones costing less than a single Russian helmet had crippled multi-million-dollar tanks. Motorcycles faster and more maneuverable than any APC had outflanked and trapped an entire mechanized column. For the soldiers on the ground, the victory was tangible, written in the silence that followed, in the blackened hulks still smoking, in the neat stacks of rifles surrendered by their enemies, and in the knowledge that, for another day, their homeland stood unbroken. For the world watching, the message was clear. This war wouldn't be decided by the size of an arsenal alone, but by the will, creativity, and sheer determination of those defending their soil, no matter the odds. Now, we want to hear from you. What part of this battle shocked you the most? The drone strikes, the motorcycle assault, or the speed of Ukraine's victory? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.